Hello, class. I hope you can hear me okay. I know we have trouble with that. I'm going to move this mic right in front of me. Okay, I have Visual Studio open. I'm going to create a new project because I want to create a project that reads in a number so that we can look at doing some data validation. So let's create a new project. This is going to be a console app, and I will name it Chapter 3, Number Input. So in my program, I'm going to do some setup here. I'm going to set up that using static system console, so I don't have to keep typing that keyword console. And I'm going to put in some comments. And I want to have a little bit about my program, so I will put, this is my class statement. This class is named program. Oh, let's rename it. You want to make it something a little bit more meaningful. I'm going to right click over here. You know, when you're working with REPL, it likes it to be named main class. Let's see, I'll name ours number input. So that's what this class is going to be. And yeah, I want to change it everywhere. That looks great. Now in my comment, I'm going to put the same thing, hopefully. And I'll put some information here, the required comments of the Riley instructor. Read a number from the console and validate. So in this program, I'm just going to have everything in my main. First of all, I'm going to start out by declaring a couple of variables. When we first read a number in from, or a piece of data in from the console, I should say, we always want to read it into a string type variable because a string type variable can handle any sort of data. So that's the safest for us. So we'll call this string user in. And then I want to have a integer. And I will call that one something else. What should we call it? Int user in. And then I'm also going to set something up as a double DDL user in. So now I have some different data types here for us to move our data around. That should work well. So first let's prompt our user for input. So I'm going to use a write command and say, please enter a valid number. Now again, I want to read that into our string user in. So no matter what they type, we'll be okay because we're just reading it in, and we want to do a read line because we want to get everything that our user typed. Now we could, if we wanted to at this point, output that information just for debugging purposes. So let's put a comment here. Debugging purposes, poor voices, we're going to use a write line command. And I want to start out on a new line because whenever we were reading in that input from our user, we should have been to a new line, but we'll just put a /n to be sure. And I'm going to output something like the number entered was parameter 0 with my curly braces, and then after the closing double quote. So first in my write line statement, my first parameter value is my string, then comma, and then the variable that I want to be used to replace that parameter. So my user in variable's value will be used to replace that 0 parameter, and I should see something come out. Let's put in a read statement here at the end, and we'll leave that, and that way we can run our program and have the console window stay open. So let's see what we've got so far. I'm going to hopefully see my input. Please enter a valid number. No matter what I type in, that will be output by our write command. So notice, even though I didn't type in a number, everything's okay because I'm still just using that string variable. So what if I decided that I wanted to convert the input to a number? Now in this case, I'm going to use our double value. So we're going to try to load up our DBL user in. We want to set that variable equal to our user input. Now right away, we should have some sort of problem, right? Because we can't just take this string and move it into a double variable. The runtime system is not capable of doing that kind of conversion for us dynamically or on the fly. We have to do it manually within our code. So can I cast it as a double? Will that work? Nope. It says, yeah, that's still not something that I can handle on the fly. So I'm going to have to use the convert syntax or the parse syntax. So I can say convert dot to double. And what do I want to convert? My user in. So my user in variable becomes the parameter to the convert.toDouble method. And the output for convert2double is going to be a double variable that will be saved in our DBL user in. Excuse me. Now let's go ahead and copy our debugging stuff. And instead of user in, we'll use our DBL user in. Try to output that. Are we going to get that far though? Not if we type non-numeric data. So let's type something 98. We see our output twice. Perfect. It all worked. Everything's fine. But if I run this again and I try, let's try a decimal number. Is that all okay? 89.7. Perfect. It's happy. All's good. Okay, so what if we use non-numeric data? Crash, runtime error, because we tried to convert an invalid value. So we have to make sure that our data is actually numeric before we can convert it to a double value. C# is not going to take care of anything there for us. Why? Because it could mess something up, you know. It could take something that is not meant to be a number and try to convert it, and instead it takes the safe path of saying, yeah, I don't know, and throws its hands up in the air. So there's a special command we can use in C# that's called a try parse. So let's try it. I'm going to go ahead first and set up a Boolean variable. We'll call it is valid, and we'll set that equal to false. Then I'm going to use my invalid value Boolean, and I'm going to set it by doing a try parse. And I can't just type the command try parse. I have to say, I want you to take a double and try to parse this as one. So what do we want to parse? Our user input. So if you remember, our user input, why is it mad at us? It says, you know, you can do this, but you need some more, you need an output value. So let me do that. My input value is my string. My output value is going to be DBL user in. So the way this command works is actually pretty fancy. It's going to say, I'm going to look at user in, a string. I'm going to try to parse it as a double. And if I can, I'm going to put the output into this variable DBL user in. But if I can't, I'm going to throw a false. So DBL user in will end up being 0. Okay, so now I don't need this line of code anymore. Unnecessary, because my try parse is going to do that for me, right? It's going to say, here is the parsed value that's a double. So let's try running this now. Notice I'm never checking this Boolean. We will here in a minute, but I'm just going to run it. And I need to enter a number. Let's make sure we didn't break anything. Looks good. Run it again. Try a non-numeric. And now the first output statement gives us the string that was entered, JKL. The second time when we output our user double that we've converted, we get a 0. So that's a product of the try parse statement. If it cannot parse the value, it will place 0 in the output. So we could put an if statement here. If is valid. Well, we've already done what we want to do if it's valid, right? Because we wanted to convert it. So what if we say if not is valid? We'll write out a message. User input not numeric. 0 used. See if that works, right? Put in an if statement here. Let's just check what we've got. I'm going to put in some invalid stuff. And sure enough, now I get my nice message from my if statement. User input not numeric, 0 used. And I see that the number that I'm using is 0. I need a period here, right? Oh, there we go. Now that's saying that I used the number 0 because I got non-numeric data. So how super handy is that for our try parse? Now we can make things a little simpler though, because right now we're using a Boolean and this if statement here to check. I think we can make it simpler. Let's get rid of this Boolean. And right here, let's make this into our if statement. Now an if statement doesn't have a semicolon at the end, so I'm going to get rid of that and close my parenthesis for my condition around my if statement. And then I'm going to get rid of the if statement that I had before that was using the Boolean. Now I do want it to still be a not though, because right now my if statement says if you can parse user in as a double, return true. Returning true is great. That means that I'm going to have a value in my double user in as well as that true. But if I get a false, that means that I couldn't parse it and I ended up with 0. So let's try this and see if you can see what's going on. So now I'm going to enter a valid number first. We don't get anything out except our number, which is exactly what we would expect. And we're going to run it again, put JKL, and now we're getting the number entered was whatever the user input was not numeric, we used the number 0, and we're getting our 0. Perfect. So in our next chapter, we'll look at how we might loop and prompt the user for this input repeatedly until we get valid input. But for right now, we're just using our if statement, so we're just checking to make sure that the input was valid. So I will get rid of these two comments that I don't need anymore so that when you're looking at things, be pretty clear for you. So we don't have too much code here. We prompted our user for input, read in what they said, printed it out. Then we checked to see if we could try to parse that user input as a double. If we could parse it, we place the result in DBL user in. If we couldn't, we output this message. And then we output that value too. So let's do the same thing for an integer. So I want to prompt our user for an integer value. And I'm going to read that into our string again, right? User in, because I'm always going to use that string, because otherwise I could try to read it into a number and I would get a runtime exception right away. So we always want to read our data into a string variable so that we can test the string variable. So in this case, because we're working with an integer, instead of double try parse, we'll use integer. Is that right? INT. Which one do you want? Dot try parse. And we'll say take my user in, and if it's valid, put the output in int user in. If it's not valid, write out the message. User input not an integer, 0 used. Now we should end up with, still doesn't like me. It's all upset. Oh, I'm just missing a closing parenthesis. Is that all that's the matter? It is. And I was just thinking, oh, it wants it some other way. Now we should be all good. I was just missing that closing parenthesis and semicolon. Is everybody happy now? Now we should have a double variable that's been proven to be valid or replaced by 0, and an integer value that's proven to be valid or replaced by 0. So if I wanted to then, I could do some work with those. Let's just write out a nice message. The double value, and then I'm going to say, oh, parameter 0 is my double value to the power of our integer value is, now we have 3 parameters there in that string, right? And I just keep putting more and more and more. Now, when I close the string, I put a comma, and now I'm going to start the list of variables to be used to replace those parameters. I'm going to put them down on this next line. So for parameter 0, I want dbl user in. For parameter 1, I want our int user in. And for our third parameter, I would like dbl user in to the power of int user in. Oh, it's like, no, you can't do that. You got a double and an int. Let's just multiply them. I just want to do something here so that we get something going. We're not worried about math right now. We just want to get something done. All right, so now this write statement has 3 parameter replacements, our double, our integer, and the product of the 2. So let's run. And when it prompts me for a valid number, I'll put 54.8. Oops. Let me close that because that was not what I wanted to do. 54.8. Then I'll do, I don't know, 4. And we should get a valid number out. Looks good. There's our 3 parameters that were replaced in our output line. Now I'm going to run it again. Add a valid number there. And then I'm going to type something wrong for my integer. we should end up with 0. I'm going to go ahead and make this one have a backslash n at the beginning of it so that it moves to a new line. I noticed that if I got that error message, I was squished up against it. So perfect. And anytime you like, you can just try experimenting with things. My message is still not quite right, is it? Try some things. The double value multiplied by because remember, it's not going to hurt anything for you to try some stuff. And if you have a question, how does that work? Well, try it. What'll happen if I do this? Well, try it. See what it does, and you can go from there. Now that should give you enough information to be able to put in your own data validation for numeric values. And we can do that now that we know how to code if statements. So good luck. Have a great time.